Hi, everybody, and welcome to a mind-defiling episode of 2K's One Episode. I'm Alex,
And I'm GoatJesus.
and today we are going to talk to you about what?
Episode 22 of Neon Genesis Evangelion, which is one of my favorite episodes of the series.
Me too. Uh, and the episode title is At Least Be Human, and the second title is Don't Be. It was written by Hiroshi Yamaguchi, who I looked up, and he had no other. Oh no, sorry, it's not Hiroshi Yamaguchi who doesn't have any other credits. Hiroshi Yamaguchi is a writer on the show, and Ano co-wrote it because he co-writes every episode. And then it was co-directed by Soramaki and Akira Takamura, who has 4 credits ever. This is the only thing he's ever done is directed this episode of Evangelion, which is kind of wild.
Yeah, you know what? Good on him, because is there a discrepancy between who directed the director's cut episode and who directed the
I think
on-air
Ano
version?
directed all the director's cuts. Maybe, I'm not sure. I don't know how they did that. I doubt they would have brought back the whole staff for that.
Yeah, I feel like it was probably Ano or something.
So, directing probably.
I mean, it is called a director's cut. It wouldn't.
Yeah, because okay, it's 4 episodes, right? 4 episodes of director's cuts, and yeah, probably just Ano directed them.
So there are a lot of differences between the director's cut and the original on-air version of this.
Yes.
And I feel like the original on-air version has been scrubbed clean of most modern releases of Evangelion. I am pretty sure the G-Kids one doesn't use any of the on-air animations.
Yeah.
They replaced a lot of the old animations with the director's cut animations, but they kept the episode length the same as the on-air version for the non-director's cut ones. So you're still watching director's cut content, even not watching the actual director's cut episode.
Because they didn't just add scenes. They also redid the animation in the EOE style, because the EOE style is a little different than the NGE, than the actual series. So they redid a lot of the animation to make it match End of Evangelion.
So
not use anagrams. I should actually say what I'm talking about.
a lot of the older animation seems to be really hard to find. We were both struggling to find the original on-air version. There is a box set you can buy in Japan that is just the TV broadcasts, and I'm pretty sure that would have all that. But
I have the Platinum Edition, but I didn't have a chance to go check it. I'll probably check it later, and maybe we'll update you in the next episode.
Yeah. But I really like the design overhauls. Personally, I think that the director's cut for this one is pretty largely successful, and all the scenes that they add, I pretty much like all of them, even if they don't fit super well. I guess we'll talk about that. They seem a little inserted at times.
You know how you know Ano directed all the director's cut stuff? It's all his Mindscape, someone freaking out, avant-garde crap.
Yeah. So in terms of the first big director's cut change, we add a scene with Asuka flashing her boobs at Kaji and whatnot. So
yes, and whatnot.
And this
very
is
awkward scene.
It's very uncomfortable. Yeah.
If you were in Kaji's position, how would you react to this?
Oh, I think I'd punt her across the boat. So... no, but
I would probably be like, please stop that. That's how I'd react, probably. Please don't do that.
I think he handled it well, to be honest, because this is the he doesn't overreact necessarily, but he does put her down. He's just like, no, you're a kid.
Yeah, he doesn't freak her out. But
you're not old enough to do that stuff. So, and
it's the Japanese way to handle it.
But it speaks to a larger thing with Asuka. It's basically a self-contained character study in some ways, because she's sexualizing herself for attention, and her mother which is something her mother didn't give her. I mean, that's what drives her is the neglect, and so she wants attention because it's something that she just didn't have in childhood. So
yeah.
But yeah, what do you think about the scene?
I don't know if it adds much, to be honest, but it does sort of set the tone because it's really awkward. It makes you uncomfortable. This is a very uncomfortable episode. It does remind us that Kaji is important to. I think this is the only time Kaji appears in the episode at all in terms of flashbacks and stuff. And I think it reminds you that he existed and that he was important to Asuka. And
that he's not a child predator, which is definitely
he's not a child
plus.
predator. That's good to know.
Yeah. Yeah.
But like, yeah, that he's gone now. He's not there. He's not around anymore.
Oh, that is a big thing, right? Because in the last episode, we kind of dealt with his death, and so
well, even though she doesn't know he's dead, she knows he's gone. She doesn't know what happened to him. So I think that's a huge part of why she's losing her sync ratio. Like she needs a support network. She won't admit it, but she needs a support network too, and she doesn't have it. And it's largely her fault. But I mean, she's also a little girl. So yeah, and then we immediately jump to the doll motif, which will be absolutely essential to this episode.
Yeah, as far as the doll stuff goes, it speaks to the fact that she not only kind of objectifies herself for attention and reduces herself to a doll, but also resents the fact that that she kind of considers herself one. It's sort of a complicated...
She doesn't want to be one. That's the most important thing. She doesn't want to be a
She
doll.
doesn't want to be one, but she's actually kind of done it in some ways. So she hates the idea of being controlled and wants to have agency over herself completely, but is also controlled by her own, like herself in a weird way. She's being like puppeted by her expectations of what she wants from others. So it's and she takes that out on Ray later. We'll talk about that later. But
yeah, she can. Ray confronts her, actually, is what happens.
Yeah,
we'll talk about that in a bit. Yeah, the doll theme is actually really super important throughout the episode because in a lot of ways, children are dolls. Children don't have total agency, and a lot of times they can't.
They're controlled by their parents, and
or they're controlled by society, or they just don't have the faculties.
They literally can't do things. Yeah,
they can't do things.
Normal people can.
That's a lot of why I think what's her name? Asuka. That's a lot of why Asuka is like, look at me, I'm an adult. I can make choices for myself. I don't cry. I have agency. I have power. That's a lot of, I think, of what happens with Asuka's character.
Yeah, but she really is just commanded by her like carnal desire for attention, which is just really interesting.
She wants any kind of attention. That's why she's acerbic. She's also German, to be fair.
Das und Brustwest.
I don't understand because like every German I've met, like not that every German is the same, but like there's this certain cultural element to German people that they've really captured with Asuka, which I've always found really odd. Just like the assertiveness and we're going to have a conversation now and you don't have a say in the matter. Like just that assertiveness is like very common with the German people I've met. So that's crazy. They must know some German people.
The dolls also reoccur through the motif of the Ava unit itself, where the Ava unit is like something puppeted by people, and then Ray, and there's a few different incorporations of the doll motif throughout the rest of the franchise. I mean, EOE has the doll scenes later.
Yep.
So
24 does too, I think. Oh no, 24 doesn't.
Doru.
Doru.
And but basically Asuka's mother died. She killed herself. Essentially, like hung herself, if I'm not mistaken.
There's a bit here about the contact experiment, right? Is this where they mention the contact experiment this early?
Oh, I don't know about that.
They say something about like, she went through the contact experiment and it drove her insane, which
right, yeah. So basically, Asuka's mother's soul got absorbed into the unit, and her mind was essentially operating without a soul, and so it kind of went crazy. And
which is interesting because this is the third time we've heard about a contact experiment involving someone's mother. It's all mothers. Ritsuko's mother went through a contact experiment after she was dead, I guess. the and then obviously Yui, and now not now, and now what's her name, Koryu, something like that. Koryu Zeppelin Soryu, something like that. Middle name is Zeppelin. But she then the next shot after that. So after they have the little bit with her in the hospital talking about like, oh, who's that girl over there? I don't know her. They cut to Asuka eavesdropping on her father talking to a nurse, I think, and they're talking about like the nature of humanity and how humanity are basically a bunch of dolls. They really want you to embrace the doll theme, so they have a whole like 45-second conversation about dolls. And then you also get the vibe that this is someone her father is kind of intimate with, or maybe having an affair with,
Yeah.
which I'm not a doctor, I'm not a psychiatrist, but I think can often lead to issues that Asuka's having when their father doesn't respect their mother. A lot of the time, it's like, oh, he doesn't respect a woman, I shouldn't respect myself. Like that does, I believe that's psychologically sound. Do not take psychological advice from me. But I think that's true. And then after that, we hear she's dead all of a sudden. Um, and we hear Asuka's. I think it's her stepmother. It might be her grandmother or something. But I think it's her stepmother. Tells her it's okay to cry, and Asuka refuses. She wants to be a grown up. What do you think of any of all these scenes? Anything jump out at you?
So I think that the part where she refuses and is like cold and basically hard and unfeeling in like a lot of ways speaks to a lot of the problems with the characters in Ava as a whole, where they refuse to sort of like acknowledge what they're going through a lot of the time. There is a isolationist quality uh um to Ava, and I think like Ava itself is sort of a criticism of Japanese society in a lot of ways, and how Japan sort of expects you to just operate as this unfeeling in cog in the machine type of deal, and de-emphasizes the individual in favor of like a collectivist sort of society. And by acknowledging your problems, you're standing out too much, and trying to be uh sort of it's considered inappropriate to be like a hyper individual in some ways, um especially regarding mental health. And so like Asuka as a young child refusing to acknowledge her feelings and her issues is very interesting, because yeah, that's the big problem with a lot of characters in Ava, is that they refuse to sort of communicate their problems. You know, even Shinji, who's considered a quite emotional, effeminate male by the fandom, is not really upfront about the way he feels, and is extremely reserved and unable to communicate properly about his feelings. So it's crazy that Asuka would harden herself at such a young age, but it does make sense. It's like it's justified within the narrative. Uh, she is extremely intelligent and driven and very hyper mature for her age. I think she even accomplishes, or she's even a, she tries to essentially be an accomplished and smart kid while her mother is still alive, actually, um, uh, to impress her. Like that's part of the motivation that Asuka has is, and so I think she considers her mother killing herself almost like a failing on her part. Like it's like I failed, and that just pushes her even more into wanting to succeed. It's like I couldn't. My mother hated me so much in some ways that because her mother was deluded and thought that the doll that she had was Asuka, and so tried to
Yeah.
kill the doll too. And that
The doll's hanging in the one scene. Here, Asuka, let me help you. Maybe
yeah.
she should be glad that her mother thought that the doll was her.
I mean, yeah, but I think it
Because
I think it
is it in this episode where there's the Asuka's the line like, "Okay, mommy, I'll die with you" or something like that? Am I imagining that?
I feel like there's something in 24, if I'm not mistaken, with Asuka.
There is, but it's
Um
not that. It's not that. But I
yeah.
I might be misremembering. I might be mixing it up. In
Uh,
24, it's just she says, "Mama, I've been chosen to be a pilot, Mama," and then she opens the door and her mother's hanging there. That's the extent of that.
so I really like the use of flashbacks in episode 22
Mhm.
because it first of all it front loads a lot of the flashback stuff, and then we get into the present timeline, and then if we do any kind of flashbacks later, it's sort of justified via the trippy
Yeah, generally
angelness.
speaking, flashbacks are considered like poor narrative form
Mm-hmm.
because they're kind of a crutch. I think is the main thing. But I think they're effective here because if your flashbacks are short, for one thing, or if they're longer and the present day stuff is shorter, then you just need to make sure you have a focus. You make sure you have to have a narrative focus, I think. And in this case, all the flashback stuff is informing whatever scene is coming next in the present day. So it's kind of jumping back and forth in a seamless way rather than, with the like.
There was a problem with a show, an anime recently called Osama Ranking, and in Osama Ranking, it was pretty popular while it was airing, but it started to lean very heavily on flashbacks to the point where there was an entire episode that was essentially 90% constructed of flashbacks, and the only present day time stuff was just to connect loosely the flashbacks. And it was so egregious and
Hmm.
disorienting and unjustified a lot of the time,
Right.
where it would flash back to incidental characters that don't even really particularly matter,
Yeah.
and it would just be like, oh, look at this random character and how tragic their backstory is,
Oh.
and then they would die or something, they would just be
Hmm.
killed immediately after that. It was like to generate some sort of like sympathy in the short term for
Yeah.
random characters. But
Yeah.
here it's not only narratively justified why we're flashing back a lot of the time,
Hmm.
it's focused. It's like, okay, here's this episode is Asuka, man.
It's an
We're
Oscar story,
gonna
so here are a bunch of Oscar
examine.
flashbacks. Yeah.
Yeah, and we've already sort of not we've already sort of had rapport with Asuka up until this point. I'm very interested. I'm very invested
Yeah,
in
I want to
Asuka
see
as
these
a viewer.
flashbacks. That's one
Yeah.
thing. As an audience, I want to see the flashbacks.
Yeah, it's like it's a character we've come to know over a long period of time that is really interesting, that is kind of out there as a character, and so it's answering like an audience question, which
Mm.
really helps as well. It's like we want to see the flashback, and I think it's good that they held off until towards the end of the series to start delving into the backstories. It's
Yeah.
like, okay, we've seen a lot of present day stuff with them, a lot of interactions with characters in the present. Now we want to know a bit about her, so it's justified metatextually, it's justified narratively, it's justified, it's
Yeah.
very,
Like it's like a Mask of the Phantasm, sort of.
yeah.
Where well, no, Mask of the Phantasm is different. Where the A story is really the flashbacks, and then everything we see in the present is like an explosion from that, or a flashback from that. Not flashback, like a blowback from that. And
Yeah.
Gargoyles too. Gargoyles had the City of Stone episode, if anyone's familiar with that, where we saw all the stuff in the past, and the flashbacks were really the story, and then everything in the present was just here's the result of all that stuff that happened in the past. So they were interconnected, and it was important that we saw it in that way. I think.
I I think it's also important to just not come across as manipulative a lot of the time with flash.
Hmm.
I mean, this is a writing thing in general, but the less that you can come across as transparently manipulative, all storytelling is manipulation. But
Yeah.
like, flashbacks are one of the easiest ways to take an audience out when viewing something and feel like
Hmm.
they're being manipulated. And so
You don't want them to know they're being manipulated. That's all.
yeah, you don't want to. And so I think starting it off with the flashback and then easing us into the present timeline gives it
Hmm.
more of a narrative flow, and then like whenever Asuka does flashback later, it is diegetic. It's like through the angels, it's through, that sort of stuff. So I really like it. I think it works.
Yeah.
um
Yeah.
you want
And
to
then. Hmm?
oh I was going to say, do you want to make another point, or do you want to segue
Oh
to
no, no,
the
that's. I think we should move on.
yeah.
So next we have this. We see the Ava units being rebuilt. This sort of connects to the idea of them being dolls. They're constructs, even though they're biological. They're being regrown. They're being. It's also just cool to see them being rebuilt. It's just a neat scene. And it also shows the echoes of episode 19 are still being felt. They didn't just like happen and everyone moved on and everything's fine. It's like things are starting to take their toll. It's not like in the initial couple episodes, it's like story happens, next episode everything's almost back to normal. It's almost a reset every episode. Now it's like no. All the stuff from 16 onward is like wearing them down. They're getting tired. It's a lot to deal with. We also see Misato addressing the fact that the Avas are angel-like. They're like the angels, and she wonders if she hates them too. A little bit of character development for her. We see Misato. The plates are still spinning for Misato. I did also quickly want to mention, just while we're on the subject of Misato, it's the last 4 episodes of NGE, besides the finale, the 2-part finale, basically, are really about the destruction of the cast.
Yeah, it's the systematic removal of Shinji's support system and friend group. Yeah.
Yeah, so the last episode, 21, was about Misato's downfall. She finds out Kaji's dead. It kind of changes her. Not as badly as Asuka's going to get changed in this episode. Not as badly as Rei's going to be changed in the next episode. And then Shinji's in the 24. But it just shows, the complete, like, deconstruction of their being. Not in a narrative way, but in a literal way almost.
Part of the characters want versus need is everyone wants external validation in the show, but what they need is internal validation. And so the fact that they're losing each other as a support system is very deliberate, because the show poses the question, like, when you don't have anyone, like, who do you have to rely on other than yourself? And so it's like you have to have self-love, because there's going to be times in your life where there's no one else who is capable of loving you for you. Like, Misato is a character that is that essentially validates Shinji a lot of the time, but she is now incapable of being there for Shinji or for Asuka, really, emotionally. Like, she's dealing with stuff with Kaji, and so it's like
she's got her own problems.
Yeah, everyone has their own problems,
and they refuse to help each other.
And they can. Well, they're basically incapable of helping each other a lot of the time, emotionally. So it's like you have to, when people are too busy focused on themselves and their own issues, you only have you, and so it's important to love yourself is the ultimate thesis statement of it, because there's not going to necessarily be a whole village of people to take care of you and say that you're awesome. So it's
you're on the plane's crashing, the oxygen masks come down, you got to take care of yourself before you can take care of someone else.
Exactly.
And on that subject, Misato is starting her investigation into Kaji's death at this point.
She's now dive rolling herself.
She's now Kaji can't dive roll anymore, so Misato will dive roll for both of them.
Exactly.
So there's a little scene with her on a park bench. A long shot here. I think this is the first minute the first time they do that minute long single shot animation money saver with her and Hyuga Makoto talking about Sile, and they're just kind of talking about the plot. I don't think they say anything important. I don't remember though.
It is really interesting because Makoto is very he's a character that sort of is revealed later to have a crush on Misato, and he kind of helps her through the remainder of the show in place of Kaji for the most part. So that's really interesting. And she doesn't even care about him. She's just like not even she's
aware of his presence. I think she likes him, but she doesn't. Yeah, he's not important to her.
Yeah, exactly.
On that subject, Asuka tries to reach Kaji, but Kaji's not there. He's not on the other end of the phone, and it's interesting how such an incidental character is so integral to the makeup or the network of characters. Like, you take out that one element, and suddenly everything collapses on that point. It's really crazy.
Yeah, Makoto is just so key to the cast. No, I mean
Kaji. Why did you say Makoto? That doesn't even make sense as a joke. He's still there.
We were just talking about Makoto, and then you segued to Kaji without saying Kaji, so I was just riffing.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
No, I did. I said Kaji. I must have cut out. I said she tries to call Kaji on the phone.
Oh, that's right. That's right. You did say that. Okay, I'm just being an idiot.
Punk. Don't come for me. So lots of little character beats going on here. Asuka sees Shinji and Rei together. She's deeply ashamed of her loss, and she's taking it out on Rei and Shinji. She's angry at them for reasons she doesn't even really vocalize. She doesn't even really give a reason why she hates Shinji or Rei or Misato in this episode. She just doesn't like them. She just hates them.
I think the fact is that they look happy together is the thing, and she is deeply unhappy herself.
So she feels isolated.
And well, she hates the fact that these two characters that she considers characters that are superior to her as pilots, like they're all happy and whatever while she's stewing, and she's prideful. It's not a romantic thing. She's not like going
no.
Wow, Shinji and Rei together? I do not ship. I should be with Shinji or whatever.
No.
That's not what's happening. It's
not at all.
It's definitely more of a like, how can they be happy when I'm so unhappy? I should be entitled to that or whatever.
I think she doesn't want to be looked down on either. I think she's thinking like, oh, they're together.
They're also ignoring her. They're not
like I am.
They're not even acknowledging her presence, which also speaks to the problem with her mother, right? Like being neglected. And so it's
I don't even know if they see her though.
They don't. That's the thing. But I feel like that. I think that's part of the point. Is like the motif of I'm not being seen, like that sort of stuff. So there's also that element to it.
That's also one of the director's cut scenes they added.
Yes, it is a scene that they added. Why do you think they added it?
I think just to add more. I think one thing that's lacking in the original episode, we just skimmed it, but I think is interactions between Asuka, Rei, and Shinji, because she doesn't. Yeah, so this gives a little setup for those later scenes where Rei's gonna confront her and she's gonna have that conversation with Shinji. Well, speaking of, so they have an awkward family dinner. The three, Misato, Asuka, and Shinji, they're just sitting down eating. Asuka's stewing, and Misato's distracted, so they're not talking.
Misato's souping.
Yeah.
Asuka's stewing, Misato's souping. Shinji's ramening. Okay.
Pen is there too. Misato's just drinking her beer. She's an alcoholic now. I mean, she probably always was, but it's getting worse.
She always was.
And they're not talking, and then the phone rings, and they all kind of like awkwardly sit there, and Asuka doesn't want to answer it. Oh yeah, Misato tells Asuka, answer the phone. Asuka says, I'm not answering that. It's just gonna be Kaji calling for you. Even though she was calling him earlier. I guess she doesn't want to answer the phone and have Kaji be like, hey, I want to talk to someone else. Because I guess that's humiliating to her, which is fair enough. So that happens. And then Shinji's like, okay, I'll just answer the phone. Because Shinji, I guess, is feeling well adjusted right now. For some reason.
Well, episode 19 was a high point for him in some ways. So he's riding off that a little higher than everyone else, I think.
Yeah. So he's feeling okay. So he goes to answer the phone. Asuka starts making fun of him, like, "Oh, the invincible Shinji's getting up to answer the phone. Sorry to trouble you, man." Like, even though Shinji didn't say anything to her, just
you
gotta
be better at answering the phone too.
Why answering the phone when I refuse to, huh? And he doesn't even like acknowledge that she said anything, because she like afterwards he's just like talks to her like she didn't say anything to him. He's either so adjusted to her like BS, or like he just doesn't care anymore. Really, it seems like, or he just seems to accept that this is Asuka being Asuka, I guess. Yeah.
And when he answers, it's Asuka's relatives, right?
It's Asuka's mom, her stepmom, her stepmom.
From Germany. From
Germany.
Deutschland.
And so Asuka talks to her on the phone. The Japanese actress's German is really bad, and even I can tell, even though I don't speak German.
It's pretty obvious, yeah. It's Germinglish. I don't know how to say that, but like English or whatever.
You just
But
add the
yeah,
word
it's the German
English.
equivalent.
There's no L in oh no, it's Gelman. This is the R. Actually, no, they
Yeah.
can do the R fine. The R is fine. It's the L they can't do. So yeah.
Um, this is also a fun kind of thing, but Shinji's wearing like an XTC shirt during this whole
What is that?
exchange and whatever. XTC is a band. It's a
Oh,
pretty
okay.
famous. I think it's a London-based band. Kind of a rock band, and
Mm.
they did a song famously called "Dear God" or whatever that is has a lot of religious kind of overtones to it. So it's a really famous song. But it's just interesting that he's an XTC fan. um
Yeah, all the music he listens to is like pop, I think, isn't it? Anytime we hear him listening to music on his Walkman
yeah,
or
the Walkman
headphones.
has all these Yeez pieces of soundtrack slash J-pop kind of stuff. I guess it's just the case that um the staff couldn't have any licensed soundtracks that they couldn't like obtain easily, because a lot of the music that Shinji listens to on his Walkman is from Yeez and is sung by Misato's voice actress.
Right.
So it's something that they
Except,
have a direct connection to.
except for Joy. That's the only
It was
thing he listens to.
Yeah. Uh, and as kind of Asuka's talking to her family on the phone, um, Shinji basically confronts her about like her mother, and was just like, "Oh, it's good that you have a nice relationship with your mom." I mean, he's staring at her for presumably like 20-minute
Yeah, they
phone
cut
conversation.
away. They cut away while she's talking on the phone. They presumably have this long conversation, and Shinji's just sitting there staring at her the whole time. And I'm like, this
I
is
guess
awkward.
I guess it's just the fact that Shinji really it's something that he wants to have, is like a connection to his parents, so maybe he's
Hmm.
intrigued by that.
I think he
It's like,
says that. He literally says that. He says it's so nice that you have someone to talk to. I wish I had that. I think he literally
yeah.
says that.
Yeah, so maybe he's trying to live vicariously through not understanding this German conversation.
No. Yeah. He wouldn't know what they were saying even.
Yeah.
It's funny too that she Asuka kind of lightens up here a bit too. So I mean, she might not. Her relationship with her stepmother is interesting because it's not like she hates her stepmother. She doesn't say like, "Oh, she's a horrible person." She's like, you know what? I've just never really been super comfortable around her." Which she tells Shinji because her guard is down because she was talking to someone she cares about and someone she loves and who
Hmm.
loves her, and
It's not
so
like
she
with
opens up a bit.
Jessica Pence and her father, for example.
No, no, not like that's a totally different relationship. Jessica Pence and her father, they can't even be in the same room together.
Yeah.
Um,
So
that's
heavy
from what.
philosophical
If you want to know what we're
disagreements.
referencing, by the way, check out our bonus episodes on Patreon.
Yeah.
Good plug. Good plug. uh, yeah, it's a nice little scene. Nice little scene to give Asuka a bit of humanity in this episode where she's horribly tortured. Um, also, one of my notes here says this is what German people are like. Oh yeah,
Horribly tortured.
she gets mad at herself for confiding in Shinji, and then Shinji says, "Oh, I'm sorry," and then she goes, "Oh, stop apologizing." And she gets mad at him, and then my comment is, "This is what German people are like."
The next scene, she's kind of on her period. Is that right? In the bathroom.
uh, n- they're doing. When did they do the sync test? This is after the sync test. Yeah,
Right.
yeah. Sorry. Yeah, you're right. You're right. Yeah, yeah. She's in the bathroom. No, no. Sorry. Yes. Sorry. I'm getting things completely out of order. I was thinking about the other scene where she's in the bathroom on her period because there's two scenes in this episode where she's in a bathroom on her period.
Yeah.
Yes. This is where she's looking in the bathtub. Yes, that's the one.
Hmm. And she's like kind of being really, this is a director's cut specific scene, but she's
Mm-hmm.
being really mad at Shinji and Misato and Rei and everything. And this feels like a very inserted scene in a lot of ways, because it doesn't like emotionally connect very seamlessly with the previous
No.
scene. But it is sort of just like I'm on my period and raging. So
Yeah,
maybe it's a little
there's
justified because of that. I don't know.
yeah, she's just having her emotions are erratic because she's experiencing physical displeasure.
I
Never
mean,
feels good.
a lot of people refer to this scene as well when connecting it to the "How disgusting" line at the end of EOE, end of
Oh,
Evangelion,
yeah.
but where it's just like everything is disgusting. That's sort of what she's talking about.
Did she use the
I
same word?
I don't think she uses the same word in Japanese, which is why it's a little bit. She doesn't say like "kimochi warui" or whatever, like "how
Yeah.
disgusting." Uh, I'm almost positive she doesn't. Uh, but yeah,
Hmm.
it's interesting anyway that people tie that in. I really like the
She
way that the scene is animated though. Like if you
the color
remember,
palette.
she kicks it. It's just she kicks the stool, like a stool that Japanese people have to like sit down and wash their hair on.
Yeah.
And she kicks the stool against the door, and you get this like shadow of the stool coming at the door and then like bouncing off. And it's just this really beautiful moment. It's a very attention to detail, very cinematic type of moment with very little. I love that. It's one of my
It's really
favorite.
cool.
It's one of my favorite shots, animated shots of this episode, in spite of how trivial it is. But um, and we cut to Misato after
Yeah, Masato's
she,
listening.
yeah, and she kind of has like a bit of understanding, about what
Well,
Asuka's
she's
going
she's
through.
sort of just sitting there silently in this part. That note is referred to somebody else. Sorry. Um,
Well,
she's just
she's
sort
more
of sitting there.
concerned,
She's
right?
concerned. She's concerned, but she doesn't go and talk to her. She doesn't knock on the door and say, like, "Hey, Asuka." She just sort of listens to her.
Well,
Um, ties into how she's feeling. She's not able to help right now.
yeah,
It almost hammers that in.
yeah.
And then we get to the next scene where she does defend Asuka. She tries to defend Asuka because her sync numbers are low, and Ritsuko's like, "This is atrocious." Ritsuko is really mean about Asuka in this episode, and then Misato cuts in and says, "Well, she's on her period. She's having an issue right now." And Ritsuko's like, "That doesn't matter. Who cares?"
The thing is that Asuka's not able to sync up because of her esteem is extremely low,
Hmm.
and she's not able to connect to others, including the Ava unit, who is sort of like an individual. It's like a relationship, and so Asuka's
Yeah,
relationship with the unit has deteriorated at this point because she herself is so um has like such lack of esteem and an incapability, like Asuka's, because of her shame in episode 19 of losing while doing a solo mission. For all intents and purposes, that was her point where she should prove herself.
yeah,
Is now sees herself as a failure,
yes,
and is so focused on the fact that she is a failure that she's not able to have like form bonds with people because she's just so like Ava is about self-love because the only way to connect to others is to come at it from a place of self-love first, and Asuka has no such self-love and so is unable to connect to others, including the Ava unit.
hmm
um which
it's
is what
interesting.
this which is what the scene with Asuka and Ray in the elevator is about in
Yeah,
part.
we're getting to that soon. It's interesting though because like Ray lost just as badly to Zeruel as Asuka did. Like she didn't. She ran in with one arm and completely failed and got taken out in one attack. But Ray's not being hard on herself, and Shinji, he put up a good fight, but he was going to lose too until the
Until
unit
Mommy
itself
saved the day.
intervened.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
So it's not
Okay.
even that Shinji was particularly like the victor or the savior of that.
No, it's just that Yui snapped into action.
Yeah.
The next scene, quickly, Misato and Ritsuko are talking. Misato is being really serious. She's pretty upset about her home situation at this point because she's not really able to keep things under control. Ritsuko kind of teases her. In the English, the original English, it sounds like she's being nasty. That Ritsuko's being nasty, and she's not really because the tone in the Japanese is totally like, "Oh, is your trouble in paradise?" She's trying to cheer her up a bit with like a bit of a glib comment, and then Misato like claps the hell back at her, like, "Oh, I'm sorry, I don't live with a bunch of cats like you do." And it kind of, and then she apologizes, and it's yeah, so lots of passing the Bechdel test, I guess, in Evangelion with Ritsuko and Misato. uh, and then we get to the elevator scene. Love the elevator scene. How do you feel about the 1 minute long shot here of
I
them just
mean,
silently standing on the elevator?
there's the fact that this is the director's cut and they could have shortened it, but they didn't.
That's
I think that
true.
speaks to how even if it was like unintentional for the to pad the episode time
Yeah.
originally, it's now been embraced as a choice, because it is just this like heightened tension that keeps like climbing as this elevator goes, and
Yep.
you're waiting for it to explode, and it does eventually. But weirdly, it's Ray who instigates it instead of Asuka, which is very unexpected.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, Ray is trying to connect to Asuka in some way by basically being like, "Girl, the Ava unit is a person, and you got to treat it like one." And then Asuka says, "Nah, it's just a dumb doll, just like you." so and um so Asuka objectifying the Ava unit by literally like reducing it to an object uh is not helping with her being able to sync with it and everything like that. Um
Mm-hmm.
and maybe she herself is objectifying herself throughout the series,
Yeah.
which is not good either. It's like you can't reduce yourself to an object or reduce other people to objects. I think it's like really harmful, and a lot of people can disassociate where they view others as almost NPCs, like non-playable characters in the world.
Yeah.
And it's important to always have that realization that everyone has their own story and they're their main character of their own narrative, if that makes sense. So it's
Yep.
everyone's a player in the world. um and
Yeah. The scene is kind of straightforward. I remember the first time we watched the series, when Asuka walked onto the elevator, I had a very visceral reaction, like, "Oh, this is gonna be good." I had, but I don't know if I have anything else to say about it. It's again this the feminineness of Evangelion, and it's not. I mean, the Bechdel test isn't really that important, but like women have conversations with each other where they talk about themselves. They're not just cheerleaders.
Even when men get brought up, it's not often in the context of romance, like in the case here where I mean Rebuild would go on and reshift the focus to be something about Shinji's dick and whatever, and how they're competing for the love
Yeah,
triangle. But in this situation, when Shinji gets brought up, it's just because she doesn't like the fact that he outstaged her, and
yeah.
that's mainly what it's about. It's not romantic whatsoever.
No, it's the
it's
opposite. It's,
it
oh, I'm just a little girl who needs Shinji to save me, I guess. Like she's mocking that idea. Like
yeah.
she's annoyed about it.
And
She doesn't like to
same
be
with
vulnerable.
Misato and her father. It has really nothing to do with romance. It's like revenge
No.
and
Well,
and
it's not even that it's about romance, because I mean, you can talk
burden.
about romance and talk about your own role in a romance, but it's not about what do you think Shinji's gonna do? What do you think he's thinking? Like they're not talking
But
about
they're
that.
always connecting they're usually connecting the male characters to themselves. So I
Yes,
think that's
exactly.
very
They're
I think that's
present in the
very
conversation.
it's less about them. It's not about them. It's about me and how
Mm-hmm.
they are affecting me in some way. So
Mm-hmm.
which I think is really cool.
It is
Um
cool. And Ray admits that she would die for Commander Akari, which we kind of knew, but it's interesting to hear her say that. And Asuka, it makes Asuka so mad so that she just slaps her, because I think, I mean, on some level, Asuka must care about Ray and think that Ray should stand up for, and Ray should not be the way she is. On some level, that has to be the case.
Well, it's like she also sees her as a hypocrite because
Yeah.
Ray is basically telling her you have to see others as people, like they're not
Mm-hmm.
like these dolls or whatever. And then she's just like, well, you're a doll, you're being controlled by Gendo, clearly. It's like you hypocrite, you absolute hypocrite. And it's like I think it's a great scene because it really shows
Yeah.
There's not been so much tension between Rey and Asuka since like episode 16, and this is definitely the peak confrontation between the two.
It also
Yeah.
completely changes them. They take both of this conversation, they both really take to heart, and we'll see that
They
as the show
do.
goes on.
Yeah, like Rey starts to disconnect from Gendo, and like Asuka starts to sort of fall even further until she finally makes that realization she needs to at the end with in the lake.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, it's like, oh, the Ava unit isn't a doll. It's my mother. So
Yeah.
yeah.
And then quickly stupid scene where Kensuke's at school and he's like, "No one seems to be here anymore." And it's like, "Thanks for reminding us that Kensuke is in the show. I really appreciate that." And and that's it. That's the point of this scene.
He'll get yeeted off screen, I think, by the end of episode 23. So
Yeah,
this
well,
will be the last time we
everyone
see
moved
him.
away. Kensuke just moved away, I guess. Toji's not
Yeah,
around either. He's busy in the hospital. Where is Toji? Anyway.
he's in the one-legged association for one-legged people.
Oh, yeah, 'cause he's got one leg now. I forgot about
Yeah,
that. Yeah, so anyway, I think this is just to say school's over. We're not going back to school.
yeah.
Which is kind of a shame, but I mean, actually, in the original 24 script, a lot of that episode is set at the school, and all the characters are still around, but they changed that. So, Asuka in this, like I was saying, Asuka immediately goes and tries to connect with the Ava. She basically takes Rey's advice. She's like, "Well, worth a shot, I guess." So she goes and has this like really crummy, shallow pep talk with it to be like, don't just listen and do what I say, okay? And then she's like, "What the hell am I doing?" I think it's a funny scene.
Well, I think the problem is as well is that she's commanding it like it's a puppet again or a doll. So that's
Yeah. She doesn't
interesting.
understand. She doesn't
Yeah,
understand, but it's just,
she's
yeah.
it's not a conversation so much as it is like orders. It's very
Mm-hmm.
uh
Well, she just doesn't know what she's doing. It's not about talking, having a conversation with it. It's about like letting your guard down.
yeah.
It's interesting that Rey would say that, considering Rey is not very emotional. But and then we have the angel shows up. This is at the 13-minute mark. We finally get an angel. This is not written by Akio Satsukawa, despite the fact that the angel appears when the angel would
Roughly
appear in
at
a
the
Satsukawa
midpoint.
episode.
Yeah. It's the midpoint.
It's interesting because they usually appear at the start of Act 2, but this is like the middle of Act 2 almost.
Yeah, midpoint twist. That's usually that's like it's a kind of culmination of events that's pretty common where the dynamic shifts. Yeah.
Yeah, it's also interesting because usually the angel appearing is the start of the conflict, but in episode, and the reason it's always in a Satsukawa episode is because Satsukawa doesn't write stories about the angels; he writes stories about character conflict. That's why the angel appears so late, because the angel's not that important. And that's the case with this episode. Is the conflict is Asuka sucks, right? Like Asuka's not being a good pilot. Her life is in trouble. It's not about Arael is a problem. We need to stop Arael, which is the angel for this episode. What does his name mean, Michael?
It means light of God, and he's the angel of the birds. Not the bees, though. Not the bees, but the birds. And so it makes sense that you'd have Arael be like this coming in from space and generally being kind of bird-like. This is one of the cheaper budgeted looking angels. It's kind of, it doesn't really have any details whatsoever. It's just kind of some random wings in the sky. So
it's so effective though.
It is, and this is one of the more iconic angels. One of my top angels, I'd say. Yeah.
Top 13 for sure. I'm just kidding.
Top probably top 4 or something. So
how many are there? 15?
Yeah, there's more than in Rebuild. I think there's like maybe like 12
there's
or
8 in Rebuild
10
and 13
Rebuild
in the original series. I think that's what it is.
Yeah. But I would say Liliel, Arael, Kaoru, and Zeruel are kind of my top 4, I want to say.
Yeah.
So,
yeah.
Not in that order necessarily, but necessarily.
Yeah. My top, I like a lot of them. Zeruel, Erspiel, Arael, Armisael, Tabris.
So Asuka sees this as kind of like an opportunity to prove herself, right? And
Right.
so she kind of just like goes and charges headfirst
She
into trying to
charges into
fight the
battle.
angel.
Well, I mean,
Yeah.
initially, Misato is like, okay, Asuka, you're going to take up point 2 and provide backup for Rey. And Asuka's like, what? Are you kidding me? No. So she charges into battle immediately because she's eager to prove herself. Misato says, that's fine. That's okay. This will be her last chance. And Ritsuko kind of iterates that because, okay, there's a weird moment here in the dub. I was watching the dub of the director's cut, the original dub, I think it's the ADV director's cut dub.
Yeah.
And Ritsuko at one point says, if she fails, pardon my language, that bitch Asuka won't be a pilot anymore. Which I was like,
that's extremely inaccurate, crass, and kind of random, to be honest.
It's really weird.
It's like, Ritsuko, what do you have against Asuka? I mean, I know that her sync ratio isn't high.
Have you ever spoken to Asuka? Like, you don't really talk to
she
the
wouldn't
kids.
even know she's a... Anyway.
2000s dubs, they were a lot freer in ways which were amusing and sometimes a little more like there's a bit more personality there, but like that was a weird moment.
Ritsuko is more like disassociating from
it's
pilots.
just a weird thing for Ritsuko to say too, because Ritsuko's not an emotional character.
No. She's disassociating from the fact that, like, you know, they are children, and she kind of is viewing them as expendable in part because I think she has her own guilt regarding Rey and like the creation of Rey and everything. So it's like, she's involved in the thick of it, like Ritsuko, and I think there's some guilt manifesting in the way that it's like,
when I don't think she cares about them as anything but a resource.
She doesn't. Yeah, she's seeing them as a resource more than anything, and so she even says it's like, oh, we can replace Asuka. It's whatever, you know, like that's what we're gonna do. Not that she thinks that Asuka's gonna die or whatever. It's more of like we're gonna ship in Kaoru or something. Yeah,
she's only concerned with operations. She's the operations manager or whatever. That's her job. That's all she cares about. She doesn't care about their personal issues.
And Shinji isn't allowed to help. He's not being deployed because Unit 1 is pretty valuable at this point. It's taken on the S2 engine.
They don't know what it's going to do.
Yeah.
That's what the problem is. They don't know what's going to happen if they put it in battle.
Yeah, and it's going crazy. It's been going crazy recently and everything like that. And but Shinji's usually the one to step in and really help Asuka in a time of need. Like he's done so in 19 and Magma Diver and in several occasions, and it's kind of he could save her, but he's not able to this episode. He wants to. He even is just like, Dad, let me go help her, because at this point he's kind
cares
of
about Asuka.
Yeah,
we've established even in this episode that he really cares about Asuka. He really likes her, even though she's horrible to him. I also think Asuka doesn't mind as much, even though she said she does. I don't think Asuka minds as much when Shinji comes and rescues her. I think not that she likes it, but I think it's less humiliating to her than when Rey does it.
Yeah.
And then one of my favorite moments in this whole show, where Asuka's just sitting there and you hear the dun dun dun, and she's waiting for the angel to come into range, and you see the viewfinder coming together, and then just all of a sudden you hear Messiah, just that's the name of the song, just playing over it as da 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 da. Da, 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 da. It's such a cool moment. I think this is the first time they use classical music not in an anime, but in Evangelion.
Yeah, they'll continue to sort of use it from here on out, including the movie, but including the movies. But yeah, Death and Rebirth also has plenty of classical music. But yeah, this becomes a stylistic choice from here on out. I hear that Anno actually wanted more classical music to begin with, but then something about the executives were like, nah, you know, like I'm pretty sure the opening of Eva was originally going to be a classical piece of music, and then it wound up being changed to the Zankoku, you know, that one. So it's a but I guess Anno had an excuse now to start using classical music because they were running out of money. Though you wouldn't get that from this episode. I think it's
a budget issue. Yeah, I think they save money by using a public domain song. They don't have to pay Shiro Sagisu for another banger, another Shiro Sagisu banger.
Yeah.
Um,
They were using the temp track in this situation. But it really works well. I mean, angels being associated with old religious music is kind of perfect in the first place, and what's really interesting as well is there is this disconnect between how beautiful and what the song is about, which is about like loving God and things like that,
yeah,
and God's love and stuff, and then you could just get this horrific scene. uh it's a there's a huge like cognitive dissonant element in a way to this that I really really like.
it's cool. It's very cool. And
Yeah.
it's really what they do with it every time. It's always and it's always it's not just classical music. It's always religious anthems because they're all the ones they use are all. I mean, a lot of classical music is, but they're all religious anthems. They're not about concepts. They're all about God. Messiah's about God. Ode to Joy's about God. What's Beethoven's fifth
Well,
or ninth?
air, they also
Ninth.
use air and
Jesus. Yeah, air.
um
Oh, air is air not about God?
I'm not sure, but it's done by the one guy who really likes God, so maybe it is about God.
Well,
So,
the three main ones I'm thinking of are Messiah, Beethoven's Ninth, and uh, Jesus. Mine, I can't say it. Mine
oh,
right.
Jesus Bibli at Mein Fjord or whatever it is.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, those three, and those are all definitely religious
I
anthems. So
mispronounced that like crazy.
it's
Okay.
okay. People know what we're talking about. The one from the
Jesus
end of Evangelion.
blibet mein Fjord or whatever. I don't know. So
I don't think it's Mein Fjord.
whatever it is. Okay, so
Jesus is my leader, the great leader. Uh,
this is a very famous scene. It actually has a TV trope page that cites this as the origin of it, which is uh mind sexual assault. Let's just put it that way or
it,
whatever. But
yeah, is it mind rape or mind the other thing?
it's the rape one.
Yeah,
On TV tropes because the thing is that Asuka's mind is being invaded like
violated.
unconsensually.
She's
Yeah,
being violated. Yes.
yeah. So
Trigger warning in hindsight.
that's why I was trying to sort of tiptoe around the language, but yeah, um it's a very brutal scene in a lot of ways that is composed via a lot of really limited animation techniques, and it's
Mhm.
actually fantastic how effective it really is and how insanely disturbing this whole thing is. So
And
um
he shall live forever and ever.
and
It's kind of haunting.
so Asuka is we get more insight into um her like life and past and how she feels about herself. um
Yep.
get more doll imagery.
More doll
um
imagery. The angel can't be beaten, incidentally, by the way. It's above them, it's beyond them. It's up looking down on them, torturing them like a god, which I think
like
is
a puppet.
important.
It's puppeting them like a
And yeah,
puppeteer.
they're all puppets to the angel.
Yeah. um
Uh, and it's making her do things she doesn't want to do. It's toying with her. So yeah, the
it
theming is very strong here.
it's basically also almost directly confronting her and saying like this is what you are, and it reduces her to like the simplest version of herself like
Yeah.
imaginable. It's just like you are nothing but these three qualities or whatever, and
Yeah.
it's a
The four
very
quotes.
uh chance.
Chance.
I'm Oscar Langley, sorry.
Which the dub didn't notice that all like when she's doing this because it's just repetitive and you think, oh, it's just over and over again the same thing, whatever. And I never knew this, and I was looking at the wiki and it mentioned this that like each time it's a different actor playing Asuka for that bit. It's Kotono Mitsuishi, and then I don't know the rest of their name, Megumi Hayashibara, and then all the rest of them. It's Maya, Hikari, and Ritsuko. And they're all playing Asuka in this bit, and she's saying, that's not me, because it's not her, it's another actress playing the part, which is really interesting. And the dub didn't do that. The dub didn't notice, so it was just what's her name? Uh,
It's almost like the angel asserting that this is how others see you. Like this is it's using other
yeah,
people's voices to say like uh this is what you've projected onto everyone else, and this is how they think about you. They think that you're this hot-headed, wants to prove yourself,
Yeah.
POS, like just like sexualizing herself kind of deal and whatnot. And yeah, it reduces her to in many ways like a simplified object, like asserting that she is kind of a doll in some ways.
Mm-hmm.
So
It's
um
it's also similar to we recently did a bonus episode on our Patreon, available now, about Terra from Teen Titans, and and it's very similar. The sort of self-reflective elements of it are really similar. I noticed. A
yeah,
little bit
with the
fun, but
control sort of theme and whatnot. Yeah,
yeah, and the mirrors. There's a mirror theme, a self-reflection theme. So that's really cool. It's really interesting.
wouldn't be the first time Teen Titans plagiarized Ava.
Well, yeah,
Wouldn't be the
apparently.
last.
It's
No, just
literally
kidding.
shot from Ava in Teen Titans.
The repetitive cyclical nature of the scene too, with the chants and whatnot, like
Mhm,
that is, it really taps into like the definition of insanity. You know, it's like the same
mhm.
thing over and over again, and that sort of thing. It drives
It's
you
an avant-garde film
crazy.
technique too, right, Mr. Film Master?
Yeah, to have repetitive imagery like over and over, it does. It's like very uneasy and is a discomforting kind of film technique for sure. So, um, and and then we get the scene with Asuka wandering through the train tracks. There are train tracks below, which
Mhm,
is mostly Shinji's thing, but this is a director's cut kind of scene. And the train has always represented kind of running away from your problems in some ways. Uh, but there. I think the funny thing is that she's not on the train, right? She's outside on the tracks, and it's just like kind of at the station, and it's like you can't really run away. You're not going anywhere. You can't go anywhere. You can't run away from this, and she gets bombarded by these cloaked figures and whatnot. And again, like a director's cut exclusive scene, and yeah, Asuka is terrified to disappear into a crowd and not stand out and be the center of attention type of deal, and that's what that's kind of about. So it's just like I can't be lost in this crowd. And then we get the funniest thing, which is the scene between Shinji and Kaji where
oh yeah.
uh where
What are
where
you doing with him?
it's uh it's basically a recreation of the scene where Kaji and Misato were on their date in episode 15, but instead of Misato being there, it's Kaji's with Shinji, and it's implying that Kaji's boning Shinji, and then Asuka gets jealous about that. Like,
It's real
she's
weird.
she's
It's
just like,
real weird.
she's like, you can't upstage me, not in this way. So it's very hilarious. But
Yeah. It's like, what is going on between you two?
I think that's one of the last notable scenes in this sort of trip out sequence too,
Yep.
which makes it even funnier. And it transitions to her in the unit, and she's just like, I want Shinji's help, but I don't want his help.
Yeah.
uh
She wants help, but she can't ask for it. She's too proud. So,
yeah.
and that ties into how her hatred of her childhood self and of dolls is, my interpretation of that is that maybe she feels too weak. She was too weak to help her mother, and she loathes her own weakness. I think that might be a part of it. I think that's kind of what you're getting at a bit earlier.
Hmm.
Um, yeah, and then we get more horrific imagery, and Asuka's being tortured, and she's calling for help. She's crying for Kaji. Kaji's dead, so he can't help her. She's literally in the worst trouble, and the bridge crew just can't do anything. Shinji wants to jump in and help, but he's not allowed to. He has a conversation with Gendo here, which I also thought the last time they spoke was in like 19, but apparently not. But they're not really talking about anything personal. This is just literally a totally efficient like business scene. basically.
Yeah.
And like Shinji will often jump to Asuka's rescue, I think, as you pointed out in the past, but now we can't do it. And then there's a weird bit here where Misato loudly, because Gendo's plan is, okay, send Rei into Terminal Dogma. She can get the Spear Longinus from Adam, quote unquote. And Misato's like, wait, no, we can't do that. What if an Eva comes into contact with Adam? Then we could start another impact. And then Gendo doesn't say anything. And Misato's like, oh, that was a lie. But she's loudly announced to the whole bridge crew, like Makoto, like Hyuga, Aoba, Maya, are all sitting right there. And she's like, wait, what about the top secret angel that we have locked up in the basement? Do they know about it? I don't think they do.
No, they wouldn't know about it.
So
I'd be curious to see if that was in the director's cut or if that was a scene
in the
they
director's
added.
cut for sure. I don't know if it's in the original.
That's what I'm wondering. It's like, is that because there was less stuff with Lilith in the original on-air version. I think they added that even into the Redux on-air version that you'll get on the Blu-rays. Like they added some stuff with Lilith. But yeah.
Yeah.
And
then there's a really cool scene. Do you remember this scene? Gendo and Fuyutsuki are talking about their plan, and as they're talking, we see shots of Unit Zero descending down into Terminal Dogma. And it's so classical to me. It's so like something from the Enid or something, like where the hero is descending into Hades, and like the Unit Zero is like wading through the water. It's almost like wading through the river Styx or something. It's just like this one little short segment. It's so cool.
It pulls the spear and everything, and
yeah. They added more to this in the director's cut, I'm pretty sure. And and it juxtaposes Gendo's talking, so it almost gives you this narrative sense that Gendo is the one encroaching into the kingdom of God, into the land of the dead, to do this thing he's not supposed to do, which is really interesting, very effective, very well done. It's incredible to me how cool this is, and they play a different part of Messiah, which people aren't as familiar with during this part too, which just sounds so cool. It's such a neat bit. It's a different movement, I think, from what people are normally accustomed to. And there's a lot of talk of like prophecy and predetermination here. And Fuyutsuki says something like, you shouldn't disobey the council, and Gendo says, I don't care about that, we have to do this. And he's like, why are we doing this? And he says, it's enough that there's a reason to do it, that we need to destroy the angel. And everyone seems to have forgotten about Asuka this whole time.
So and then Rei comes up like a total badass and hurls the lance all the way through Arael, killing it, and upstages Asuka yet again. With by Rei basically defeating the angel, which is exactly what Asuka didn't want the most. And from here on out, Asuka's sync ratio will be like so bad that she can't even operate the unit. It's like,
yeah, that happens in the next episode. And the spear's out in space. They can't reach it. They used it to destroy God, and now it's beyond their reach. And everything just went really bad for Asuka today. She did not improve. Nothing good happened.
It was a descent for sure. And comes from the fact that she's so self-absorbed and self-obsessed in some ways that she can't connect to others, even though that's really what she wants at the end of the day, is to be able to connect to others. And Shinji tries to make that connection in the last scene where he tries to comfort her and be there for her. Like, he's really concerned about her, and she just screams about how much she just hates him and whatnot. And that's the ending. Is that I think it's even directed in a way where she's like quarantined and things, if I'm not mistaken. Where
she's behind a tape, yellow tape or something. I don't think she's actually quarantined, but they use the imagery to show that she's isolated from them.
Yeah, she's like behind this tape, and Shinji's not allowed to cross. And it's this great image too, where we get like a shot of his feet, and how we don't see his face at all. We get a shot of his feet and then him from behind and her from behind as well. And he can't step over that line to make that connection. It is a symbol. It's symbolic, but it's also very like literal too. And they've externalized the external here with these shots where it's like he's trying to connect, but she just is impossible. Like she will refuse to do so.
She's got walls around her heart.
Yeah.
Yeah.
This is my AT field, a barrier which you cannot. I mean, it's an orange and red tape, and it's got the lines on it and everything like that, and it evokes the AT field pattern, which is kind of interesting. So.
Yep. And so that the climax is really at the very end of the episode. There's no denouement. Evangelion likes its denouement, but they didn't do one for this episode really. There's nothing after the action except for this little short scene. And yeah, that was the episode. I love this episode. I love it even more now. I've noticed so many things I hadn't noticed before, and it's just so good. It's a great episode.
Asuka's one of the best characters in anything. So I think she's super cool and really complex and very interesting. So thank you so much for listening to our podcast. If you
want to hear us talk more about Asuka this week on our bonus show, on our bonus episodes on Patreon, we're going to be talking more about her. We're going to be doing a little bit of a breakdown of her character over the course of the show. So
yeah,
look forward to that.
And we'll see you guys next time. This has been GoatJesus.
I'm Alex.
And we're going to sign off. Goodbye.